Hi, I'm Christina.
And I'm Matt.
And this is New Ways Podcast. Today, our guest is a mental health speaker and youth advocate, Donovan Taylor Hall. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. You can also call me Dono friend or Donovan if it makes you uncomfortable.
I like Dono friend. I think that's what I'm going to use all day today.
Yeah, when I go to schools
Dono
and I work
friend.
with kids, I don't like them to call me Mr. Donovan or Mr. Hall because I'm not like their formal teacher. And Dono friend is kind of like a nice little connector between like I'm an adult, but also I play this kind of different role for you. And Dono friend is your friend is kind of like the theme.
I love that. And where did that come from?
My brother
Originally?
made it up
Really?
when I was like 16. Yeah, he made up like 17 names. Like Hi Jonathan and Yoslana friend and then Dono friend. He said that and everyone was like, oh yeah.
I think that was a good choice.
That's the one, not Yoslana friend. So
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's from childhood.
yeah, I like it. It came back around, but like the role that I play with young people is a lot of times there's like that hierarchy of I'm the teacher, I'm the adult, and you know I'm not. They can't call me Donovan because like you don't know me like that, right? But Dono friend gets to kind of be something that's a little bit outside of the box of what they're used to when it comes to adults.
Yeah. When did you actually? I'm curious. When did you start using that?
My Instagram was Donovan Taylor Thomas for a long time because I thought that was really clever because of Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Oh my God, my age is showing. But then I changed it to Dono friend and then I just thought it just rings well. But then sometimes people would be like, do know friend.
That's what I thought at first when I read it. But I'm like,
it's like
no,
Donovan.
yeah.
Donovan kind of sounds like Dono friend. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
I'm
So,
so brain dead
how
right now.
about you share with us and our audience, what do you do?
suffer.
You had it, guys.
I mean, youth advocate is the main way that I say it. I have kind of like what we call like a slashy job. So it's like speakers / like content creators / educator.
You just want to help the youth
Yeah.
essentially with like their
Youth
emotions
advocate,
and
just
mental
advocating
health.
for
Yeah.
young people. I feel like there is just a lot of negative thoughts around youth. And that's something that I've seen as a trend forever. Like when we were younger, the adults said that we were bad. And so I just thought it was really important because all of the good in my life, especially my adult life, has come from working with kids. Like I've seen so much good and so much joy and hope, and even in tough moments. And I just feel like they need a voice. And oftentimes we just don't listen to them. They have a voice.
Yeah.
And if I can use like my adult privilege to kind of help people listen to them and let them be heard, then that's like what matters most to me. So I spend a lot of time talking to them, but I also spend a lot of time talking with them and just listening, because that's something that a lot of young people feel like they don't have, which is just someone to listen and say like, I'm here in this moment.
I feel like that's so valuable too, because it is, I feel like adults don't really listen to children. They're like, we are here to teach you what you're saying and what you're thinking right now. Like you don't know much. But what I'm finding though is that actually follows them into adulthood though, where people don't own their voices and who they truly are then too. It's kind of like at a young age, you're telling people just by not listening to them that like they're not important and what they have to say isn't important.
And that they're supposed to suddenly, when they become 18, have
a voice now?
A voice,
yeah.
right?
You're
After they've been
know
told
who you are
for so
now.
long
Yeah.
not to speak or to be quiet or to like know your place and stuff like that. And it's just very frustrating because I also think that we have a lot to learn from young people. Co-regulated learning is really important to me. So spaces where all the people in the space are learning. And I used to have a bell in one of my classrooms that I would ring when a kid would teach me something, just to like show them that you can teach me, like that it doesn't have to just be this one way thing. And they teach me a lot. I mean, I would say that most of the work that I do now has come from what kids have taught me about their experiences and their struggles. So I go to school and say like, what do you struggle with? Like, what do you want to learn about? And they'll tell me. And then I can create the work around that. But it's also kind of like a cheat code, because then I'm like, great, now I know what I'm going to focus on. But if you go to them, I think a lot of times when we're trying to support groups, and it's just not kids, but groups in general, they have these conversations around how to support them. And they're not included in the conversations. Like I've been to several conferences about mental health for kids, and there are no youth represented there. And like, how are we supposed to know what they're going through if we don't listen to them and then help them figure out what they need? We kind of just decide what they should be working on. It's like a big thing is like, I'll share, with parents at a parent conference or a parent speech, like, here's what kids have shared with me. And then parents are like, it's social media. And I'm like, okay, but did you hear the things that kids said it actually was? So just like, I don't know. I wouldn't be the educator or the advocate that I am today if it hadn't been for young people really saying like, talk about this or stay away from this, or maybe consider this perspective when you're talking to kids about this. So I'm grateful. I feel like they've built my career, honestly.
Wow.
And also too, I mean, the fact that you went from being a school teacher to now being on a national platform for advocate in mental health and for children in mental health as well is just, it's such a beautiful transition in a way, because I think that's something that so many people needed. And so how did you go about kind of creating that transition for yourself?
One thing that I'm really passionate about, because before I was a teacher, I was a classroom teacher for about 3 years or 4 years, excuse me. But I did positive youth development programs before. And especially when the pandemic happened and the country was like really lifting up teachers and recognizing their hard work, I also kind of wanted to lift up youth development specialists. So after school programs, Boys and Girls Club, camps, enrichment activities, like a lot of really good growth, especially when it comes to character and learning, happens in those spaces. You get to build very unique relationships with young people. And then also it's like there are no grades attached to it. And grades like add such a different layer to learning and growing. And it makes you feel like you're doing it wrong or you're doing it the right way. But in youth development programs, like everything that you're learning, like you're just in the process of learning. So I can get better at this skill. And so I did positive youth development for a while. And then I went into the classroom and I taught my own curriculum. And I know the moment I decided not to be a teacher was when they were going over the gratitude unit that we were doing with the kids. And they loved that unit. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them really loved it. They were like adamant about writing gratitude notes to each other. They were super excited because they got to see the impact right away. And my vice principal at the time was just hyper focused on data and like grades. And he was like, I feel like this kid, he's looking at examples of gratitude. And he's like, I feel like this kid could go deeper. And like, I don't think his grade should be that high yet. And I'm thinking like, this is gratitude. Like you shouldn't have a grade attached to that. And especially because I knew that student really well, he struggled in a lot of his academic spaces and he was coming alive in the gratitude space. And so that growth was super important, but because it didn't show in like the data, it wasn't deep enough, whatever that means. That's in my head. I was like, yeah, I don't want to teach this in classrooms anymore. The second that you put grades on it, it becomes about like extrinsic motivation of I have to do this. I have to get a good grade versus intrinsic, meaning I'm doing this because it feels good or I want to like have an impact on people.
Yeah. I don't even remember them doing anything in regards to gratitude or any emotional intelligence at all in my schooling growing up. So the fact that you guys were even writing about gratitude, is that something new that they added, or
it was mine?
It was yours, like you came up with that?
Yeah, it was mine.
I love that.
It was mine. Gratitude like really saved my life in a lot of ways. In college, when I do speeches with my high school students, I talk about the time period in my life because I really struggled as a kid and I did like all the right things, but there was a lot of silent suffering happening. And so it got so bad that by the time I was in college, I like didn't want to be alive anymore. And then I had an incident happen that showed me like the impact of suicide. And I understood suddenly that that was not an option. And so I had to kind of figure out like, how do I take care of myself? And I tried all these things, these practices that people were talking about. And gratitude was the one that really helped me. And I developed this practice of saying, thank you 100 times a day. And so I wake up in the morning but in the beginning, like when I was coming out of my depression, it was just like maybe 2 or 3 thank yous. And then it's a skill, like any skill you can get better at doing it over time. And then I started sharing gratitude with other people and I started sharing it with kids and I was seeing the impact it was having on them to be seen and have someone say like, I appreciate the way that you show up in this class. Like the energy that you're bringing helps class like feel fun. And I'm just really grateful for that. And then you see that behavior continue because it really affirms it. And so I just loved, before I even did the gratitude unit with the kids, I had already been writing them gratitude notes. So kids were already getting gratitude letters. So instead of me just saying, do this, I showed them what it felt like first. And then when it was time for them to delve into it, a lot of them were like, I know what to think about and I can kind of know what to access because this has happened to me. And I don't think enough adults say thank you to kids, like genuinely say thank you for just dealing with what they have to deal with and what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like not enough people honestly focus on gratitude enough, because I can even say, like, if you walk into my bedroom right now and look at my mirror, I literally write something I'm like grateful for every single day, especially when I'm down, because it reminds you that, like, yes, I'm going through a rough patch, but there are still beautiful things in this world, regardless if I don't feel like it or not. That's why even when you said, though, they didn't go deep enough with gratitude, right? I'm like, that doesn't sit with me, right? Because I'm like, it's the little things in life, though. Also, it's like this human connection, like just having like Matt and Donovan as my friend. Like, it should be as simple as that, and I'm happy because of it. It doesn't have to be like, oh, because like I live in this amazing house and I can eat this amazing food and do these amazing things. It's like the little things is why we're all here. And I feel like when we realize that we don't need all this external things and all this grandiose stuff, is when we actually like start to be happier within ourselves.
One of the theories that I built my curriculum around was self-determination theory. And it focuses on 3 aspects, which is autonomy, self-efficacy, and connectedness. And connectedness, because a lot of times people will say this stuff is like woo-woo, but there's been tons of research done around sense of belonging and sense of belonging in a classroom. And you have these kids across the country saying they feel lonely. And then you have all these systems in place that kids did not create, right? But like social media and things that really disconnect us from each other. But one of the things that helps people build a sense of self-determination is when they feel like they're a part of something larger than themselves. And one of the quickest ways to do that is to say, like, thank you, like, I see you. And my kids, I mean, the students that I say my kids, the students that I had, like, really changed my life. I mean, they gave me purpose at a time where I didn't want to be alive. And so if I don't say thank you to them, it doesn't make any sense, because they are the reason that I'm here. The kids that I've worked with for the years are like the reason I'm in this seat today. And so I am constantly trying to remind them and remind myself that like that sense of belonging is important. And you don't know like how many kids or people in general feel unseen. And feel disconnected, and the pandemic hit and it made it so much worse. And I think we, in a lot of ways, haven't come back from that sense of community. But that's really what helps lift people up. And I'm just a big believer that like kids who feel better do better.
Completely. Even adults too. Like we were talking about before coming here. I'm like, what does Donovan do for Donovan? You know what I mean? To help. If you guys could see that look he just gave.
I did an office.
But that's what I mean though, is like taking that second for yourself and like to tell people. And I love how you said disconnect too, because if you ask a lot of people in schools, especially, we have all these movies where it's like people and kids are pinning each other against each other about who has this and who doesn't have this. But when it's like you actually are like, say something you like about somebody else and show them like how much you appreciate them, it forms that connection.
It builds stronger relationships. And then there's all of this data that shows the physical effect it has on your body, like better immune system, better deeper sleep and things like that. Like it's just rewiring your brain. I don't think gratitude should be a Band-Aid all the time, right? Like if you're suffering, like I was suffering and I did the gratitude practice, but it's not the only thing I did. I went to therapy. I talked to my friends. I opened up to my family, but it was a practice I took away from that. So when I say that, because sometimes I feel like there's this push to kind of use these positive practices to kind of almost shame people who are
cover it up sometimes.
Covering like a really deep suffering. And I don't like that, you know, and I think that that's something, it can add to it, but it's certainly not like the kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, the ultimate solution. Right. I don't want to tell, if a young person is struggling with depression, I don't want to tell them to be grateful. Right.
I tell people be grateful that you can feel these emotions, because they're telling you things. They're saying that you had an emotional attachment to like this person or this experience. Be grateful that you can actually feel these things and you're not numb, because a lot of people do numb themselves.
I think it's really easy. I feel like a lot of my free time is numbing.
That's what I kind of want to ask you, is because a few times now you've talked about how you've been through some dark times and you personally have struggled with mental health and feelings in a way. Do you mind speaking about that and sharing with people your experience?
Yeah. I mean, do you mean like when I was younger or
anything?
kind of right
like, go
now?
ahead, whatever resonates.
I think even after that period in my life where I came back from that really dark place of wanting to not be alive anymore. I found purpose in the work that I did.
If you don't mind me asking, what caused those feelings?
Just a lot of stuff. I had actually, one of the reasons that we know each other is we work at a grief camp for kids.
Yep.
I had a lot of grief when I was a kid. I had a lot of death. And I was kind of put in the position as a young person to be like almost a tool for other people to feel better. And so I had, I think, 4 or 5 major deaths before I was 18. And they were all like before their time and unexpected. And every one of the situations, my way of like trying to help was to be positive and like to try to help, like, you know, sitting in my mom's lap at my dad's funeral, or like walking my brother down the aisle, walking with my brother to see his friend who passed away, and trying to like take care of other people. But what happened was I never really learned how to take care of myself, and I wasn't taken care of the way that I needed because I seemed like I was okay. And that's a lot of the work I do with young people now as a mental health speaker, is just letting them know that like having good grades doesn't mean that you're okay, right? Like your academic achievements doesn't mean you have a good relationship with yourself. And some of the most stressed out people that I have met are these high achieving kids because of the pressure that they feel, and the breakdowns that they have, and the lack of sleep that they get because they're working so hard to show. And it just feels really sad to me because it doesn't even feel about learning in that moment. It's just like, I have to do this. This is what's expected of me. And so kind of like letting that down a little bit. But I think I was doing really good with it for myself. And then I got that national attention when I did like the Today Show, and things kind of blew up a little bit. And then I kind of felt like I had to mask again because these past few years have been incredibly difficult. I went from loving what I was doing to like not wanting to be myself again, and just being so exhausted. And these past few years specifically, I love speaking to young people. It's a lot of fun, but there's just been a lot of kids who have like talked about their own struggles that they're going through currently. And there's this feeling of like powerlessness that I have of like, I can only do so much.
Yeah.
I can't go to schools. I can't build relationships with these kids, right? There's safety and boundary issues, but also just capacity. Like I can't, like I talked at this school, and 3 days later I'm talking to 400 new students. And then there's 10 students from that group who say, I have no one, and my school doesn't have the resources. And what do I do? And I just have been moving so fast with everything that I haven't really learned how to process that and how to let go of that. And it's just been, and as my mental health has been kind of deteriorated, those things get harder and harder to process, right? Like when you are struggling, it's hard to do the work that you need to do.
Completely.
Or if you're suffering, it's hard to do the work that you need to do. So I think numbing is like a way of self-protection.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, I've always kind of thought of it as a bad thing, but I also know sometimes, like we were talking about compartmentalizing, like I almost need to do it right now, because if I feel all of this, I don't know if I can get my ass up, you know, I don't know if I can pull it together after that.
Carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders is heavy.
Yeah. And like, so it's a blessing and duality.
But if it's crushing you, put it down for a little bit. You don't got to carry that all
real.
the time.
I know duality is real. Like it's very, very real. And so I can feel and know those things, and also still have this deep drive to be so close to this dream that I've been building for a long time. And there's aspects of this that I've had to learn to put down and step away from. But a lot of it really activated that core wound I had as a kid of like, when you are suffering, you hide, but when other people are suffering, you take care of them. And then I caused a lot of harm when I was a kid because I was so messed up at that point. And so I was like, I'm harming myself, I'm harming other people. So I took care of people, but I also like caused harm. And I talk to young people about that a lot, when it's like, when you don't feel good yourself, it's really hard to take care of other people, right? And so if you do, it takes a lot out of you, and then you can get resentful and feel weird about it. Or people are just walking around harming each other because they're hurt and they don't know how to take care of
people.
them.
Hurt people. Say it all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like so true. So I try really hard to minimize that. But what I would kind of do was start to hurt myself. I don't want to hurt the other people. Yeah. I stopped harming other people once I had that period. And like, I still unintentionally cause harm. That's a thing that people do. And when like when I think about causing harm and stuff like that right now, I would never cause harm to a kid. Intentionally, I would never cause harm to a kid. I can't say I would never harm, because sometimes we say things.
You do it unintentionally.
Yes, you don't
And
even
like
know.
everyone has a different internal dialogue and
Yes.
experiences and
Yes.
things that are going to form the experience that they're having right now. Yeah, completely.
So I think it's just like, I'm in this huge learning period, but it's hard to learn when you're tired, and I've been tired for a while. And sometimes I feel bad, which is why I have to look at understanding that two things can exist at once. Like I can feel tired and then also still be grateful for these opportunities I've had, because sometimes I feel like when I say I'm tired or I'm complaining or I'm struggling with everything, it feels like a slap in the face to the dream that I built.
You feel guilty because you're like, I have all of this.
No, those things are separate. Those things don't have to be like mutually exclusive. Like you can have both of these things at the same time. And I think it's important to recognize that that's a possibility for people, that things can be going well and you can still be struggling and still be suffering. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or like anything like that. It just means that you've got two kind of things to grapple with. But with the work that I do, Dono Friend is like an identity piece of me, and it's really consumed a lot of who I am as a person.
But that's only one side of who you are.
Yeah, it's only one side. Dono Friend is thriving, and Donovan is like just trying to survive.
But there's no Dono Friend without Donovan. Remember that. But continue. I'm sorry, man.
No, it's okay. I think understanding too is like, you talk a lot about this duality of identity. And so what are some ways that you have been able to take care of yourself or really kind of recognize where you've seen growth in the areas of duality?
I don't know.
Okay.
Honestly, I think because I'm just in it still, and I try to practice a lot of self-awareness, but a lot of it is like trying to attach my self-worth to my actions versus how people perceive me, which is really important. Like I can feel proud of myself if I'm doing the work, and I'm proud to be putting time and practice and energy into something I care about, versus like I'm only proud of myself if other people are proud. And it's just wild that this mirrors so much of what I talk to young people about, because it's like, you have to have a good relationship with yourself. But then there's all these ways that kids are not set up to do that as they're younger. And then that's why a lot of college students are struggling, because they're just thrown into the world and they don't know how to like ask for help or take care of themselves or balance like their schedule, or think about like, what do I do to like feel joy or feel happiness? Like they don't have the opportunities to build expertise in themselves as kids. And unless you go to, because as a speaker, I go to schools that have resources, and I go to schools that maybe don't have the same resources, and you see what they get to do in the schools with resources versus the schools that don't have them. And so some of these kids in these, schools that have a lot of resources do get to do this kind of work. And it's sad because all kids need that. Yeah. But that's just like the disparity of education in this country, right? If you're lucky enough to be born into a family that has resources to send you there, then you do get a little bit deeper. But then you have more opportunity for success and to thrive because you have a stronger foundation because you had these experiences.
Yeah. What are some of the ways that we can sort of take a lot of these experiences that a certain select group of kids that are having, either based on economic status or just based on their lifestyle where they currently live? How can we sort of create a system to help other students who may not have those opportunities?
I don't know about systems.
Yeah.
That's like the toughest part. I think for me, my why is very grounded in trying to be accessible to young people. And so with like making content and stuff, my dream was always to be like a content creator and public figure for kids. But when I did the Today Show, it was conversations of me working with kids on social media that kind of shifted away. And then suddenly the people who were watching were the people like adults, like parents and teachers, and kids weren't really watching. But I stream on Twitch. I play video games on Twitch, and I talk about a lot of that stuff. And I want to build that up. I don't make like any money from it yet, and it's very hard to do when you're traveling. But one, I have the most fun that I have in my life probably is when I'm playing video games, and the kids are like making me play these video games that I'm awful at, and they're laughing and they're teaching me. But then also like if I have this big channel, then it's accessible because there's no gatekeeping there. Yeah. Like they can come and they can watch and have fun and they can learn, and I can be someone that is like maybe giving them messages that they don't hear, that they're not hearing from their parents or they're not hearing from their teachers or stuff like that. And that's where I'm trying to build it. But it's just, again, like the exhaustion is hard. Like I'm trying to make a documentary, right? I've been working with a production company for years. I'm speaking, I'm running my own business. I'm doing content, I'm traveling. I was coaching for like 2 years out of this. And so it's hard to be consistent. And then I get into that shame cycle of like, here you go, wasting your time. You're not doing what you want to do. But I'm just trying to understand. I think a big key for me right now, and it's something I'm talking to a lot of young people about, is just self-compassion. Especially through tough times, because beating myself up doesn't help.
No,
It just makes me want to lay there more and being gentle and kind with myself, but also still holding myself accountable to like take care of myself. So it's not just like, do what you want, lay in bed and eat Cheetos all day, which I did do.
Which is fine. Like, please, if you have to have a day where you rot, please have that day.
Cheeto puffs.
Just have faith that you're going to get up the next. But
I don't want to
take
bed rot
the
for
space.
too long. So it's like I was sitting here bed rotting for like 2 weeks straight, and I was just thinking like,
see, that's a long time. I'm talking like one day. Do it, give yourself that grace, but then
2 weeks straight. But this was after the 8 weeks that I did 26 speeches.
That's crazy.
And so then when I realized that, I was like, why am I judging myself for being exhausted?
You're a rock star.
Exhausted. Shit, I'm just trying to help kids.
Do you not realize though how many things you're like, I'm exhausted, and then you're like, I'm trying to do a documentary, I'm trying to do a book, I'm trying to do this with kids and this. Oh my gosh.
It's a lot. And my brain is fragmented. And that's why I said all I do
That's why you're exhausted.
And so it's like, but that's like one thing that's really helped me. And I talk to kids about this a lot. And I think that when we think about building self-awareness in people, it is a skill, which means the first couple of times you do it and you ask yourself deep questions, you may not have access to those answers, but it's just showing up and continuing to ask yourself, why am I doing this? What's coming up for me? How am I feeling? Building your emotional vocabulary to be able to name what you're going through. But one thing that's been super helpful for me is to practice curiosity over judgment. That's been huge. So when I was laying in bed and I couldn't get up, because again, like there's no one's knocking on my door being like, you're not at work. It's just me. So there's no reason to get up. If I have a meeting, I will be there. But if there's nothing planned for the day, I just won't get up. And so I was laying in bed just being like, you lazy piece of crap, get up. You're wasting your opportunities. The judgment just made me more paralyzed. I just sat there and then I felt worse about myself. But then I started saying like, why don't I like getting up in the morning? And one thing I realized is because I'm doing so many things and I don't have a set schedule, that I'm overwhelmed with anxiety from the moment I wake up. What am I going to work on today? What do I need to do? Right. And I'm ADHD and I'm like not medicated for it because I struggle a lot with that. And so learning how to work with myself, I understood like, okay, just pick 3 things and write it on your list for tomorrow. And so suddenly I wake up and I know 3 things I can do today. And there's a reason to get up, but I wouldn't have got to that answer if I was just being judgmental with myself. And so when I think about young people who are harming other people or harming themselves or who are really struggling, like being judgmental to yourself is not helping them. And so holding a space and talking to them about like what's coming up for you, right? And like, why do you think this is happening? And where is something what feels difficult in your life right now? And a lot of times when they have that space, they can access it. They can really think about it. And so I'm just trying to do that for myself, to also model it for young people, because a lot of people just tell kids what to do. And I think influence is way more important than manipulation.
They watch you too. Kids watch how you walk and how you behave.
That's why the don't say or just say no thing didn't work, right? Or the telling kids not to drink.
Yeah,
right?
but you're over here doing the same thing.
Shoving it in there. It's everywhere. And it's like, you don't get to because we say so. And then you're drunk falling out of
Actions
stools.
do speak louder than words.
The dare campaign.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
oh
it's all these things. You're telling kids not to be stressed out. You're telling kids not to put pressure on themselves. And then they see you doing it, right? If you tell someone, what I found is a lot of people don't like to be told what to do.
Yeah.
They just don't.
I agree with that.
And then, but there's this power dynamic between adults and kids where we do get to say, I'm going to tell you what to do. And it's important because sometimes it's like, I'm not saying take away everything in terms of structure for kids, because structure is a part of development, right? And their safety is number one. I use this idea of offering, where I'm like, you don't have to take it. Like, here, I'm just going to offer this advice, leave it or take it, right? Because we live in a society right now where everyone is like, I know the answer.
I feel like so many parents too are like, my word is God. My word is like, this is what's right. And the second though that parents actually admit that, hey, like I might not know the answer to this, because a lot of adults don't. They just want to act like they do. If you tell your child, this is what I think. I'm not too sure. I'll help you learn and grow
Let's
from
figure it
this
out
too.
together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's invalidating them too. What they need to be doing at this age, like especially middle school, which is my favorite age to work with, is learning how to trust themselves. And so when we invalidate that, then they are in the process of invalidating their own feelings and their thoughts. And then we wonder why young people don't like themselves, because the voice in their head that should be the one that they're trying to learn and grow with is like a critic all of a sudden, right? And it's because we're invalidating them. I think it's wild. I did a conference one time. I hope they see this. I did a conference one time and it was a bunch of teachers, and then they had some students come, which I thought was great because it was about kids. And I think that if you're doing anything for kids, like advocating, there should be kids there. And there are a lot of kids who want to do this kind of stuff, who want to be heard, right? I think that's super important to note, right? And these kids come on stage, and I'm looking around, teachers are talking, they have their backs turned to them, people are on their computers working, blah, 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 and talking over these students who are in front of this audience talking. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the same shit that these kids get written up for. If they were doing this in your classroom, you would lose your mind. So what makes you think that you can do that to them? That's so disrespectful. But it's just this entitlement of like adult,
just because you're
hood. I have the answers. And what I found is like, that's what kids don't like. Right. And so a lot of times I'm just like, hey, I don't know, maybe. I hope this works. Try it out. Right. It's like I tell them, like, you're at the grocery store. You don't take everything just because it's there, right? You pick and choose, and maybe you try something and it didn't work. And so next time you're not going to do it. But that's the process. It should be this exploration phase of like, what works for me? How do I work with myself? What helps me grow? What makes me feel unsafe, right? Learning these things. But when people are telling them, I have the answers for you, it invalidates that discovery process for themselves.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things that I really struggle with so much as a therapist for kids, and even as a behaviorist, is that like I have to challenge parents' egos constantly. And when you challenge that ego, you challenge a value. And that value is a belief system. And then your existence as a person and who you are, if they don't see it the way they want to, then it completely is eradicated. And I've seen that time and time again. So I can't, like, how do you challenge parents' values? And like, do you come from the kids' perspective, or how do you talk to parents about those situations?
I mean, ego is the enemy of learning. Ego is the enemy of growth. But ego, I think a lot of times we have this really negative connotation around ego. Ego is just this thing that our brains have developed to protect us.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that kind of goes back to that adult entitlement of like, I am safe in my beliefs. I don't have to be challenged anymore. And sometimes it has to be a rude wake up call. I work with a lot of communities with gifted students, and I'm just begging them to like help their kids take care of themselves, because these kids are under so much pressure and stress. And it's like, I know that they're stressed out. I know that they're depressed. I know that they're tired, but they're not going to get into this college if they don't work right now. And so I had a mom who like pushed back on me really hard about that. And she was like, she needs to stop crying. Like, I get it. It's tough, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, frankly, your daughter is telling you she's depressed. Your daughter is telling you she's exhausted. And you're saying, I get it. Get up. You need to work hard to get into this good school. But would you rather your kid get into a good school or not be here? Right? Because that's what happens.
That's realistic though.
Like, and that was the moment where it was like, ooh, because it's like, of course you care.
I feel like a lot of parents would be very like offended by that statement.
But again, it's like, and I have to approach working with parents way differently than I do with kids. I have to take care of the ego a lot more
kids
with parents.
A lot of times I feel like are more open than adults because they
have to be. That's why, because that's the system that we built for them, is that we have to listen. We have to take this. And then that's why youth culture has always pushed back, because it's like, we know what's best. And this is not new. It's been like this for a while. I talk about the curtain. This is like this idea that I have. We used to be able to protect and shield kids from the real world, as we call it, although kids are living in the real world. Curtain used to be, you couldn't see through it. And so unless your parents were talking to you about this, unless you were watching the news, right? You have social media now where that curtain is transparent. So we're trying to say, like, you don't see what we're doing. Like, this is adult business. Kids are seeing what adults are doing.
Ooh, okay.
Right? Like, how do we as a society yell at young people for acting the way that they act, and look at the adults in our country? Look at what we're doing. Look at the way that we're fighting. Like, the way that I'm seeing the people in charge, right? Public figures, the way that they're acting, like these are the things that kids get in trouble for. And so again, we're telling them not to do it, but then we as adults are doing it. I mean, I've never seen public officials like the way that they're name calling and bullying each other. And this is the stuff that we are actively trying to weed out of schools. But again, if you were telling a kid not to do something and then doing it, it completely defeats the purpose. We have to show them what it looks like, right? And so that's my role, I think, as a mental health expert, or excuse me, mental health advocate, is to really show them what it looks like to be like, yeah, I'm struggling. I'm going through a tough time and some days are better. Like I'm showing instead of telling them. And it's just, I think it's important that we recognize that they're watching us in all the ways that we don't want them to watch us. And they're picking up on that. Kids are not the only ones out of control, right? Like a lot of us are out of control.
Oh, completely.
Yeah. A lot of us are out here causing harm. A lot of us are deeply rooted in I know what's best.
Yeah. But how many do you think are willing to admit that? Right?
Right. I do it all the time. I don't know.
Oh, me too. But
There's a lot
like
of stuff
admitting
to
that I
know.
was wrong and messed up is what brought me to the growth to be like,
That's what
okay,
I'm
I need to
saying.
fix this now.
That's like the
admitting
first
it is
step.
the first. Yeah, admitting it's the first step.
That's the first step. That's learning. Learning is vulnerable, and it doesn't feel good if you don't know how to take care of yourself in that. Because we in society, it's like you're not supposed to be wrong, but you inherently
but why not
have
though?
to,
If you're wrong, it's a learning experience. Then you know the right thing.
You
after.
have to be wrong. You have to be wrong. But then it's like I could go on a whole tangent about this, but then you have grades that are showing like, am I doing this wrong or not? And so it's like a kid goes from an F to a D, and that's growth, right? But because it's a D, it's still not good enough.
Yeah.
However, if there was no grades attached to that, you can just track and recognize the growth and say, cool, like last week we couldn't do this. Here's how we've grown, right? I can do this differently now because I've learned. I may not have the right answer, but I've gotten over this little hill. And so I do a lot of like this work with mental health, but I also do a lot of this work with teachers and parents around like, how do we support young people? And most of the time it's like, we have to show them what we want, right? We can't just tell them. And it's just frustrating, I think, to not have the ability to make choices in your life. That's really frustrating. And that's most of childhood. And again, I'm not saying, show them the checkbook and be like, here's all the bills and I'm stressed, and you don't have to go super deep with them, but just to even say like, I'm going through a tough time right now. I'm trying to take care of myself. I'm feeling like I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself, right? Those things resonate with kids. They have those experiences. And then I don't know why we separate the emotional lives of kids with adults. I don't know why we do that.
Well, that's not even something we teach in school, is emotional intelligence and regulation.
We're trying.
But we really don't, though. It's not a part of the like actual curriculum. I guarantee you there's probably like in high schools and stuff an extra class you could take, like a psych class or something, or thankfully but not every school has a U.
Well, and again, going back to the schools with resources, that is what they're getting. They are getting stuff like that. And then again, you have the people who are at the top who have the resources getting the work that is going to help them be more successful, right? When the people at the bottom are just trying to survive. It's like you are thriving and the people down here are just trying to survive, right? But if we want all kids to thrive, they need to have access to this. Yeah. And I'm not saying that I'm the answer to it. I'm not the first person to talk about this. I'm not the only person doing this work in the world. There are like, I'm working with this company called Blueprint from Serinda Swan. She was an actress and she really cares about emotional intelligence. So they created this app to bring into schools to make it accessible. But I can only do so much. And that comes back to that weight on my shoulder thing of like, if I decide I want to stop working with kids, that's okay. I don't care how mad anybody gets. If I said which I really want to do is work with elephants. If I said I'm cool. I've loved working with kids. Thank you. I'm out.
But that's the thing though, is kids should be able to have the space too. Like that's you literally like practicing what you preach them. They should have the space to be like, this isn't making me happy. I'm drained. I need a beat. I need to walk away, like follow my own heart and my own voice instead of whatever you told me I should be.
18 years of that. 18 years of being told. Because
that's why now we've said this. Like, I feel like we have a bunch of adults who are lost and don't know who the hell they are and are depressed because they were probably muted and told like whatever they want to do was wrong. Or like, you need to be quiet. And there's something that you said earlier that I really just wanted to let you know. And I know you say like you get overwhelmed and you want to help everybody. And I can see the passion behind this. Like, I love that you're this passionate about it. But never underestimate your impact also, because there's been times I've seen speakers on stages and have never seen them again, but just one thing they said lit a fire in me and changed the way that I think. Yeah. So your impact is probably even so much more than you even think it is.
It's just like the least it's like it's what I can do. Then I have to
You're doing
check
a lot. It's not the least you can do. You're doing so much.
I just have to check my expectations for myself. I think like passion is great, but passion is like fire, and fire burns out. Right. And so I've tried to shift into be like, I don't live like in my passion. I live in purpose more. And my purpose is like to just do what I can to help. And I don't know what's going to happen to a lot of these kids. I don't know who took anything away from it, but for my sanity and for my own well-being, I have to be able to just say like, I can just do what I can, and that's it. And that has to be enough.
And that's good enough, though.
That has to be enough, you know?
Yeah.
That has to be enough.
If you could give any advice to teachers or students of how to actually like improve a children's mental health, what would it be?
I was gonna say don't.
Don't? Okay.
I was just being dumb. I'm sorry. That's
no,
just
but
like
by all means.
That's just like my. We were in it, and I was like, let me just not do that right now. I don't know. I think when we put a lot of pressure on individuals, when there are systemic things that need to change, that's sometimes why I struggle with the well-being and mental health community, because it's like, this is on you, right? But a lot of times when people are living in poverty, when people don't have access, people are living in unsafe homes, right? And people are worried about eating and stuff like that. Like there's systemic things in place that are, and it's like the same thing when we're like carbon footprint, like when corporations are the ones who are putting all this out into the climate, they're doing all this damage to the climate, but we're focusing on individuals of like, I need to reduce my carbon footprint. And so it's a systemic thing. That's why I left education, because I don't know how to change that system. And it takes a lot more than one person to do that, right? And so I just try to help kids learn skills around taking care of themselves and understanding that like there's much more to them. And I focus on things like self-talk, like how you talk to yourself. I focus on things like growth mindset, specifically around learning to be a human. So not just like academically, but like, I made a mistake. Am I going to like learn from this and grow? Or am I, because kids, a lot of times kids will make mistakes and be like, I'm a bad person. Right?
It's detrimental to their confidence in themselves.
Well, I just don't believe, like, I got a lot of that feedback from when I started posting my videos on TikTok. People project that how they see you on social media is very different. And there was a lot of like, you're such a good person. And I don't think I'm a good person. And the reason I don't think I'm a good person is because I don't believe in that fixed binary of I'm a good or bad person. I've done bad things in my life. I've caused harm. I've also done a lot of good. And so when I think I'm a good person, I think that sometimes it kind of invalidates the harm that I've caused, right? And it invalidates the harm that happened to those people, right? Or if I think that I'm a bad person, then I'm never going to see the potential to do good. It's why incarnation, what is it called? People in jail.
Incarceration.
Incarceration. Strike that.
Incarnation. Hey, you still come back from like to learn your karma when you're reincarnated, but continue.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I meant, right? Is like, what are we showing them that they have the ability to have impact, that they can come back and do good, right? Or are we just keeping them in this mindset of you are a bad person and you need to stay in that space? Some rehabilitation programs in different countries literally set them up to do service and to do community and to have opportunities to see that what you've done in the past doesn't have to define how you move forward. I mean, you have people who were in the KKK who have reformed and now are teaching other people to get out of there. I mean, that's like one of my favorite stories was a guy who was in the KKK and he met a black man who helped him and it's his best friend now. And they run an organization to help other white people who were in the KKK who have been indoctrinated to get out of it. And this guy was in a hate group, right? But look what he was able to do when someone showed up and gave him love and said, I know you're hurting, right? But like, I'm here, see me, right? And so if I believe that I'm a good person, that I also think that I'm not going to be as aware of the fact of the impact I have on other people, right? That I can still do bad things. I can still cause harm. And I want to actively choose to do as much good as I can. And so I don't view myself as a good or a bad person. I view myself as a person with the capacity to do good and the capacity to do bad. And so when I talk to kids about this, when kids are having a hard time forgiving themselves, it's like, what do we want to learn from this? What can you learn from this? Yeah, you really harmed your friend, or yeah, you really caused a lot of problems with your family, or maybe you were in a really bad place, or you stole, or you did something that is really awful, right? What are you going to learn from it? How are you going to redeem yourself? How are you going to hold yourself accountable to grow and to learn from this and then to do better with that, you know? And so I think that is one of the best lessons that we can teach people is that we are not like a fixed thing. You know, we have the capacity to do good. And I think when we're doing a lot of bad, it's important to recognize like something's not right.
Like, why are you doing all this bad? Yeah, because hurt people when you're like,
why am I doing all this bad? You know? And people would be like, what were you like in high school? Baby, I was drunk. I was drunk. I was on drugs.
I tell Matt this all the time. I'm like, when I was in high school, I was on benders every single weekend. I could not wait to get out of high school.
My God, I was wild.
But I was also extremely hurting due to my circumstances and my situations and the adults that were around me telling me I wasn't good enough, telling me to shut down. So I'm like, you're right. I'm not. So I might as well just start acting like the piece of shit that you're telling me I am.
I mean, I was so embarrassed. My freshman year of college, my sophomore year is when I created the suicide plan for myself. And I was so embarrassed when I went into therapy. I would kind of like black that time period out. And I was like between 17 and like 20, like, whew, I caused a lot of harm. Like that's not who I am and blah, blah, blah. And I had a therapist be like, okay, what happened in that time? And then I was talking about when my best friend died in high school. And I was talking about like the lack of support that I had from the adults in my life at that time and how I was running around, like literally living like euphoria. I'm not like, I wasn't a hot, like, I don't like that. I wasn't like running around like, no, I was throwing parties. I was wild. I watched Euphoria and I was like, oh my God, that is like what I was doing.
Don't say you weren't hot. You have this amazing personality.
No, but I was going to say I wasn't a hot girl in high school, but then I was like, I don't like hot girl in high school, like shouldn't be in the same sentence like for me. So that's why I was like, ooh, how can I rephrase this? Right.
We get the point, but yeah, no, completely.
I just think it's like she was like,
but that girl in Euphoria is also extremely hurt too.
That's what she's saying. Yeah. And she just said to me, she made me list out all the things that had happened to me in those years. And she was like, yeah, so you were like suffering a lot. And I know you want to push that side away from you, but also like, one, hold yourself accountable the ways you can, which I did as much as I could with some people. I went back and tried to apologize. I did like an apology tour. Some people were open, some people weren't, and that's okay. Right. But then also to hold space for that young man who was just out of control. Like if any of my students were telling me they were doing that stuff, I would be so deeply concerned for them. And I had adults that cared about me. I was really good at hiding it, but I think something that I've had to tell myself, and it's hard to say it because I had unconditional love, but I didn't have the structure and support that I needed. And I didn't have anyone yank me up and say, what are you doing? Right. And that told me that people didn't care. And so with young people, like they see me being fun and silly with kids, but also like accountability is huge. When we were at camp, right? Like I'm big on that. Like I care about you. You're going to be pissed at me right now because I'm going to help you hold yourself accountable. You're going to face the consequences of what you did. But this is an important lesson you need to know because I just felt like I was flailing. I'm like, nobody, I was in a cop car when I was 14 years old and they didn't arrest me, which is wild as a young Black boy. Right. Yeah. And I go home and my mom, who I love, who really just wanted to be unconditionally loving to me, like made me pancakes the next morning.
What did you do to get in that cop car? You don't have to answer me, Anna. We won't get into that.
I was drinking.
But your mom, okay. The average like teenage thing. Trust me, I've had my few encounters too. But your mom made you pancakes.
Yeah, because I don't know. I just think it's like I don't know. I mean, I love my mom and I'm really grateful for it. I think that I was really good at hiding. And that's a lot of like, I talk to kids because it is also their job to advocate for themselves, right? So it's our job to be there for them. It's a two-way street.
Did she ever ask you though, like what's going on, or did she always just assume?
I think a lot of people just knew. And then, but again, I had good grades. Yeah. And I had friends.
You're like, he's doing everything that society says he's supposed to be doing. He must be okay.
He's just wild, but that shit was wild, truly wild. So it's like, I think sometimes we're afraid to discipline and we're afraid for accountability. But I always talk about like the swimming pool analogy when it comes to youth development. It's one of my favorite analogies because you have this pool with 4 walls. And then as we help young people grow, like their job is to build their skills to swim in the pool, but the walls don't move. The walls are there. So when the kids get tired, they come back to the walls. If you think about parents, right, the babies are on the walls from the beginning. And then as they get older, they swim out a little further, right? And then eventually they build their skills up. The walls don't chase them in. They don't shrink so they're safe. So you have these parents who want to protect their kids from struggling all the time. They won't let them face adversity, right? And then you have the ones that the walls are gone and there is nothing for me to hang on to. And I think that I had like kind of 3 walls as a kid. I had the love and conditioning, but there was this one wall where I was just getting swept out to sea a lot. And it's like, I'm getting swept out and I need to come back. And so for me, it's like, we have to be those 4 walls because eventually they have to get out of that
So
pool.
what was that missing wall then?
I think my dad.
Okay.
I think my dad was in the military, and I think that I would be very different if he was alive.
If you had like that father figure there, like, let me know what's going on.
Or just somebody, like, because I have older brothers and like,
but it's not their responsibility to hold that role in your life.
I just think having an adult in my life that disciplined me, because discipline is care. There's a difference between discipline and punishment, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's also talking about what you did and be like, this is actually kind of wrong, letting you know why did you do it? Okay. And this is kind of like,
you're supposed to learn that stuff, right? And I just kept going further and further, and I was doing like crazier and crazier things. I mean,
mine was the opposite. I got punished for everything. That's why I was like,
but again, that's when it's like,
I just don't listen to you anymore. Bye.
When you pull that in. So it's a balance, right? But that was something that I was missing. And so now when I work with young people and we have this experience at camp, like they had to see, because I love to be fun and I love to be the caring person. But when they were causing harm, I was like for real with them. I got real serious with those kids. Like, you need to recognize what this opportunity is. You think that this is going to be around, but this is such a special place and y'all are causing harm here. Yeah. Like, your legacy will be a legacy of harm if we don't turn this around. And they needed to hear that conversation. And they did. The LITs, that group, I mean, they turned it around because they were out of control and they just needed someone to be like, yo, what are you doing? What are you doing right now?
So besides saying like, what are you doing? How would you address that then? Like, how would you talk them down from whatever act they were doing that was wrong?
In that specific situation, I had a lot of support from the other counselors.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole bunch of us. They had to have like a real, like, we're not doing anything until y'all get your act together.
Because there's a difference between being like, you're wrong, and like, because that was the thing, is I was always told I was wrong, but I'm like, why?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially because children are still learning. They're learning right from wrong. You just have to talk to kids.
I don't know why people are so afraid to just talk to them about why we're doing the things that we do, you know, and why we need to do the things that we do.
Intention and explanation is everything.
I mean, I had a middle schooler who I had to I had a situation with him because he brought alcohol to school, and I was the teacher that found it. And I was really upset, but I was like, but also, like, I have to hold you accountable, and I'm going to take care of you and make sure that you're not being, you know, cruelly punished. But at the same time, like, this is not okay. Like, what you did is like, you're putting yourself in a really bad situation, right? It could have been a lot of other people who found you, including police officers, right? They would have gone very different from that. But I told him, like, look, like, when I was younger, I did this and nobody did this with me. And so I was like, and I know you might be mad at me right now, but like, I care about you, and I'm going to care about you, and I'm going to love you no matter how much I piss you off. Right. Because when you look back, you can say he was annoying, but at least he had my back.
Yeah.
At least he was looking out for me. And I'm still in connection with that student. He's in college and I still have a connection with him. Cause I was like, he left and I just started crying to my coworker, and I was like, he's going to hate me. And I worked so hard to build this relationship, and it was fine.
Yeah.
The next day, like, when he came back, he was like, hi, Mr. Donovan. Just went about his business. Everything was fine. And then suddenly he started opening up to me more. And then he started coming to me with things that were difficult for him. And I'm like, okay, cool. So it showed him that I'm a safe place.
You came at it from compassion instead of like,
and still with accountability.
Reprimand. Yes. Yeah.
Accountability is important. So I think that that's like a huge part of what I didn't have and now what I get to be. Especially for boys of color and youth development programs, when I have those opportunities to be like, yeah, like, we're going to have fun and you're going to enjoy yourselves, and I'm going to hold you to high expectations, and I'm going to help you get there. Right. So you can create high expectations for yourself. So you can know when you're doing right and wrong. So that voice that you can build up in your head says, like, I know that this is causing harm. I know that I shouldn't be doing this. Right. So I think that that's a huge part of youth development in general that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah. I do understand that, and I love that perspective you're coming from, because once again, understanding versus reprimand is a huge difference. Question for you too, because how would you address the kid though? Because I do believe some people though, like, they do harm strictly because they don't know any better. Because once again, like, adults do harm because when they were a child though, like, that was done onto them, so they think that's normal, they think that's okay. But then there is like things that by society and people know strictly are wrong. how would you address a situation where a kid did something that was wrong, but they actually thought it was okay? Like they truly did not know any better.
Restorative justice is like a really powerful tool to use in those situations where you can create the community to talk about things.
Yeah.
Especially between students, between kids. I think it's even powerful when it's between a kid and an adult, because we don't let that happen enough. Or to say like, this is how this impacted me, or this is what happened. Like in that conversation, it was a restorative justice conversation, or I think that's what it is, RJ, right? It was that conversation because it was about restoring. It was a call in versus a call out, right? Which is like, this is the place that we build. Like we want to take care of these spaces. Or there's another situation at camp where these kids played a prank on a younger kid, and that kid had a really hard time with it. And they were like, it was just a joke. And I'm like, intention versus impact, and having that conversation, and then like following up with a let's go talk to him, right? And having a conversation between them,
like realizing when that thing's actually wrong, like, oh, let me actually then try to right my wrongs.
Talk.
Because like I didn't know better then, but I know better now, so it is my job to now correct my wrong and do better in the future.
Was like that kid was like, I don't need an apology. Like, just don't do that to other kids. And then the boy was like, yeah, he's like, but I owe you one. And he was like, and I'm trying to grow and be better. So like, are you okay if I give you an apology? And he was like, yeah, if it helps you. Yeah. And I don't know if that kid
How old are these kids?
This one was like 10, and the one that it happens to is 10, and the other one was like 15 or 16. Yep.
Wow. If only all apologies went that way.
If only we apologized more in general.
Like my biggest thing too is like, moving forward for you, where do you kind of see yourself long term with the work that you've done and the knowledge you've been able to create and cultivate for yourself?
I don't know. I'm trying to make it through this period in my life. I think that's what I would say. And one thing, because these last 3 years, I have really struggled with experiencing joy. I really struggled with trust. I've really struggled with a lot of things that were never issues with me before because of what happened with social media content and a lot of the feedback that I was getting. And so right now, it's hard to see the future. It's hard because right now I'm just trying to get out. I'm just trying to survive. So I don't know where it will go. I've had a vision for my life for a long time, but right now my vision is to make it through this in one piece. And I don't know what opportunities will come. I just want to feel better. So my future is, I don't know what this is going to look like or what it's going to turn into. I just want to be here for it. Yeah. Yeah. This is a hard question. Yeah. It's hard.
But your answer was so real, honest, and beautiful, because I feel like that's also something that some people probably need to hear. I feel like, especially in schools, you always ask them, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? What do you see for the future? And sometimes it's like, I can't see the future right now. It's okay to just be like,
developmentally, they're not, they don't do that. They're in their feelings. And that's what's so frustrating when we invalidate that. They need to care about their future. And I'm like, yo, they're just trying to survive day by day.
Yeah.
And we put so much pressure on them. And I'm like, I don't care like what you do, what you end up doing in your life. I just want you to be good, bro. Like I want you to feel good and know that struggle is a part of life. You know, the ups and downs, that's life. It's beauty in it, but we got to teach kids. And I don't use that phrase like we got to, but we have to. It is crucial that we teach kids to take care of themselves in that, because so much damage is being done. They're doing so much damage to themselves. They're doing so much damage to each other. We are doing so much damage to them. And then they're becoming adults who don't know how to take care of it. And it's like, I am a product of that. And I admit that I watch these gurus and these people who do this work, and they're like, I was like you, and now look at me. And I'm like, I'm like you.
Yeah. But they don't show, we talked about this. They don't show that bad stuff though either.
That's why I didn't want to be a motivational speaker, because I was like, I don't want to go into these schools and tell these kids that like, look at me now. And like, I'm going to a college, or I'm going to a career fair at a high school to speak. And it's like, yo, I'm living my dream. But because I didn't take care of myself, because there's core things here. I got my dream and I'm still deeply unhappy. The same way that some of you have good grades and you're deeply unhappy, or you have friends and a family that love you and you're deeply unhappy, because there's core things that we're not addressing. And I think that that's something that I just want to help them see and like understand that this is, I would rather a kid be like, I know Mr. Donovan was struggling and he made it through. Right. Or I know when he was going through a hard time, he took time for himself, or he asked for help. Like I've had kids be like, oh, you told me like, I asked some kids like what they remember from my class, and when I was talking to them at the high school graduation, and a couple of them were like, I remember when you were going through a really hard time, how like you told us and you communicated when you took care of yourself and you took time off. And I'm like, that wasn't the curriculum, but that's what they remembered. They saw that.
That's probably better than the other thing that they were supposed to be learning.
Because they were doing time management. And I remember asking my co-teacher, I was like, can I take a break?
But that is time management, though, is being like, I need to take care of myself right now. Thank you.
I'm making time for myself. So
yeah.
I just want to live a full life. You know, we deal with grief, and it's a blessing to be alive, and that comes with the ups and downs. But I just I'm just figuring it out. I don't have the answers yet, and for other people, it's like looking for those answers in others is tough. You know, you got to be your own expert. You got to be the person that knows, and it takes a lot of practice and time and work. And all I can say is right now, I'm being way more gentle with myself, and I'm being way more compassionate with myself than I've ever been. And I'm holding space for like Donnie, like little Donnie, who is like just trying to take care of everybody, you know, to feel safe and valued. And I'm like, I'm here with you. Like, I'm taking care of you. Like, you're safe. And that's been such a powerful experience for me. And then to be able to talk to kids and then talk to myself as a kid and say the same thing, right? It's just, it's hard. I'm just stressed about kids. I'm worried about them. But I also have a lot of hope because of kids. Yeah. Both things can be true.
Yeah. Well, I have hope just because and I'm not saying all this work that everybody wants you to do or this stuff you think you have to build. I have hope just because of who you are, and just you coming on and sharing your honesty is what the world does need. And I just want to thank you for that, because that was a perfect answer. You're like, that's not an answer, but it is. You know,
I was like, I used to do that. Sorry, I just have to laugh. This is something I've learned I do, which is like when I'm getting emotional, because like this is going to end and then I have to leave. And this is something that happens. This I've noticed, which is like we talk about these things and then I don't have the system to take care of myself afterwards. So I told you I was doing a speech at a high school, and I was just so tired and exhausted, and my self-worth was so low, and I was just sobbing in the car on the drive. And then I like literally got there, cleaned myself up, got in there, talked to these kids about self-compassion, talked to them about asking for help. They're giving me all this feedback. Kids are like literally come up, and I had a boy literally be like, last night my dad called me weak for feeling sad about my friend dying, and you're the first man I've heard say that it's okay to be sad, right? And I needed to hear that today. And then it's like, that's a real impact. And then I get back in the car and I'm sad. So something that it's like, I just have to figure out how to take care of myself in this work. It's the same thing. I have to figure out how to take care of myself as I'm learning and I'm growing. Learning and growing doesn't stop when you turn 18. Hopefully you keep on learning. Well, some people like it that way. And if that's your prerogative, go for it. Because I'm certainly not the person to tell people you have to do it this way. But to offer that perspective to young people, that you can be a lifelong learner. But that also means there's going to be really hard periods. There's going to be vulnerabilities. There's going to be failures. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be successes. There's going to be people who will fight for you. There are going to be people who fight you, right? All of these things. If you put yourself in a vulnerable state, you have your ability to grow. But also, like, how do we take care of ourselves so the struggling doesn't turn into suffering? And that's what I'm trying to find out right now, because this is what I want. I know I want to do this, and I want to be excited by my struggle. But because there's things I'm figuring out right now around how do I build capacity? How do I make time for myself? Like, if I don't figure those things out, then the work that I love will become suffering. And that's my biggest fear. Not being good enough is that this work will become suffering for me. And I don't want that, because I love this work. I love it.
Yeah.
A lot.
So you said right now you're going to take the space. So
I'm going to go see Simone. Shout out to Simone. She's one of my best friends from high school, and she is just light and love, but she's also like she'll open the door and just like hold me and be like, there's my baby, and just hug me.
And that's what you need sometimes.
And we used to dance all the time when we were younger, and we're going to a festival and stuff. So I'm just really happy, because now it's like I don't have to put on a mask with her. And then it's a blessing to be able to have people who can just be like, I got you. Yeah. And especially when you're the person that's got so many people it's really nice. It feels like a true blessing to have someone like her, and that she's here and I get to see her directly after this. So
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Do you have any other questions, Matt? We usually end, honestly, on if like, do you want to share anything else with our viewers before they go, or have any words of advice? Do you have any, or it's okay if you don't, if you do?
Take care of yourself when you are struggling, and get care for yourself if you're suffering.
Yes. Good way to end. Thank you so much for coming on and being yourself and sharing with the world your knowledge and just who you are and your emotions. I really appreciate it.
And I'm just so happy to see you.
It's so nice to see you. It feels a little weird, right?
Does. It does.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It's great. I think I had a lot of my own learning.
Yeah.
I think I said things out loud today that I needed to say, so I appreciate that. I haven't said that I loved my work in a while. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder, right? Talking about things.
And it was organic. It was not forced. It came
Yeah.
out, and it was just a reminder. So I appreciate that.
Well, I'm happy you got that out of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy you got that out of it. And until next time, I love you all.
Thank you so much. Keep shining your light.